So yeah, I spent like, I guess, the next 4 or 5 months at my mum's, and slowly getting back on my feet again. They eventually put me on crutches. And so once I got on crutches, I was going stir crazy at this point. And my mum was getting sick to death of me watching motorbike racing on TV. They literally, the week I came out of hospital, they had a big motorbike, it's called the Isle of Man TT race. And it was on all week, and so I'm watching that, and my mum's like, my mum hates motorbikes anyway, so she's like, get that off the TV. So anyway, I'm on crutches. As soon as I get on crutches, I'm like, I'm going to the gym. Because I've been locked up now for 5 months, and I was down. So actually, at the time I was like had the accident, I was in like an off season.
Did you compete?
I hadn't competed at this point. No, I was actually preparing for my first show right before the accident, and then my nan passed away, and so I shut the prep down. And then 3 weeks after that happened, I had the accident. So I was back up to, I think I was about 240 pounds, 250 pounds when I had the accident. Not pretty. It's a sloppy 250. And then I got off crutches, and I think I was 195 pounds or so.
So you lost about 45?
50, I lost about 50, 55 pounds, yeah. So I go back into the little local gym near my mum's for a couple of sessions. And I'm like literally on crutches, so I put the crutches on like I mean a cable crossover. That's pretty much all I can manage to do. So I managed to do that and some arms. All my weight is on my right leg because this one was with the way the VMO was torn out, so it was still a bit mangled. Slowly start working my way back into being able to move, and that helped me mobilize and walk a bit freer. So every day got a bit easier. And then I think around the September time, I'd moved back to my dad's. So my parents are separated. I moved back to my dad's. It was just an easier setup there. And that's why I mentioned Ripped Gym.
Right.
So that's the gym that's near my dad's. So I go back there and start going training in there. And this is when I'm starting to put a bit of size back on. I started working with John Meadows because I once I could start training properly, I was like, I need to get a coach so that my diet is regular,
so
it's consistent.
Let's take it back. What got you into bodybuilding?
So
I know that you saw
I was personal training,
right.
And at this point, when I was personal training, I'm like, when I moved to the gym in London, the one with the high paying clients and whatever, there was a trainer, like 2 of the trainers there were bodybuilders, proper bodybuilders. Competed at the British Nationals, came like top 6 in the heavies. He's one of my best friends now, his name's Barry. So when I went there, I was like 200 pounds and he was like 250, and I think he was like 2 months after the British final, so he's in pretty good shape still. Right. And I'm like, God, this guy's like round and bubbly and a freak. I'm like, the same thing that happened when I was at university with my buddy there, the little Dorito, happened, but it repeated, but with a genuine bodybuilder this time, right? So I was like, wow, that's what a bodybuilder looks like. And then him and we started working at that gym the same day. So we then started hanging out. He rode motorbikes too, and we just started training. And then I was like, well, if we're training like bodybuilders, I might as well eat like a bodybuilder. I might as well get big like a bodybuilder. Because at that point, I think I said I was like 200 pounds. I thought I was big in my tiny little gym. And then we went to a big gym in London. I'm like, oh no, I'm not big anymore. So I'm like, okay, let's start putting some food away and off season try and grow. So that's where I went to bodybuilding. Did pretty well, put on a good amount of weight. And yeah, that's when I was then prepping for a show. And like I said, my nan passed away, and then the accident happened.
And then you go back to Ripped.
Right, so then I'm back at my dad's. I'm not on crutches anymore, and I can drive. So I started going back to the gym. And at this point, I'm like building my squats back up a body weight range, right? So I'm like holding on to a thing and just getting range of motion back. And then after a couple of weeks, because obviously with an injury, once you start moving it, it accelerates the rehab, right? Once it was healed, it was just scar tissue at this point. So now I'm getting some range back. I start squatting again. Another month or so of that. So it gets round to, I go in like early September, and the British finals are like middle to the end of October at that point. So I'm in there for about 5 or 6 weeks, and the girl that I was dating, we'd both go and train in there, and then there was this big guy in there, and this big girl in there as a couple, and obviously they were like freaks to me. Right. But the guy I was like a bit wary of, like, you know, because at this point I started to put size back on.
You're like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
Why is that with
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm like, he's pretty jacked, but I don't want to admit he is. I'm like, yeah, this dick, right? And then the two girls start getting on really well, right? So they start talking, and we're just like, and then, yeah, and then it's like British finals happen, and then so I walk in the gym, and so the big guy I'm talking about is Luke, right? So Luke Sander. So he sat at the reception on the bench by the gym, and I walk in, and I'm like, oh, like he got sixth at the British finals. So I'm like, oh, congratulations at the weekend. He's like, like doesn't want to have a conversation with me. And I was just being polite as well. I didn't really give two shits. And then, so I sit down, start eating my pre-workout meal. He's over there. Then the two girls are just chatting away, and anyway, so now I go and train, he goes off and does his thing. And we get in the car on the way home, and my girlfriend at the time, she's like, oh, so we think that you and Luke should like train legs together tomorrow. You're doing legs and he's doing legs. And I'm like, well, you volunteered me to basically train with this guy. I'm like, okay, whatever, fine. And at this point, I decided to get some strength back in my legs. So I'd been training again solidly for about 8 weeks, because this was a few weeks after the British finals. So we're now in like November time. And my weight is up to like 260, 265. So I train with Luke. He's always, at this point, we've trained on his own. I was always training on my own. We keep up with each other. We start squatting, and obviously, so I can squat pretty well at this point. So I basically taught myself how to squat again, which gave me a base. So like I forgot all my bad habits, and then my squat just became this really easy lift for me. So we start squatting, and he goes a plate on, I go plate on, plate on, plate on. We start going rep for rep. Up to that point, that hadn't really happened to him, where someone was keeping up with him. And then we go to the leg press, and same thing happens. And I keep up, and we're not changing the weights. And he's like, oh, you're pretty strong, and you train the same way I do. And so get to the end of the session, he's like, hey, well, what are you training tomorrow? Right. And I'm like, oh, whatever. I'm not that fixed. Like, if you want to train together, we'll train. He's like, yeah, let's hit back. I'm like, cool, sweet. From that point on, we didn't miss a training session together. We trained. I then, after the Christmas, so that's November, we started training together. I said, I'm going to do a show. I'm going to start dieting. The first show of the year is in April in the UK. So it's like, it gives me 16 weeks. So he's like, sweet, let's go. And he already knew he was going to do a show, late qualifier for the British finals again. So I do my show, get second, and qualify for the British finals. It turns out the week before I did my show, I had an MRI on my wrist, and the broken wrist I told you that they'd missed, they found. So I'd done the whole prep with a broken wrist. So I get on stage, do that, and they say, okay, we're gonna schedule you for surgery. Well, the NHS in the UK is a free healthcare service. So it's not like private, you don't go in and get seen right away. I'm on a waiting list. So they're like, yeah, waiting list, you're gonna have wrist surgery in September. So I'm like, well, the British finals are October, that's that gone, and out the window. So then we start focusing on Luke. So now like we're both amateurs at this point. And we go, okay, Luke's got to qualify and then win the British. Like the pro card was the goal. So we get to work, and I'm now back into an off season, so I'm getting big and strong again. And he starts pushing, starts dieting, just kind of grows, kind of gets better as he's dieting. I'm like, this guy's a bit of a freak. He wins his qualifier, and then we get round to September, and the NHS delay my wrist surgery to November. I'm like, so I could have done the British finals, but at this point, it's too late. So I'm like, Luke, focus. So Luke does the Welsh 5 weeks before the British finals. He wins the Welsh qualifier, goes on to the British finals, which happens to be the 9th of October, 2016. So today is the 9th of October.
Oh, wow.
Today is the 9th of October.
Oh, wow.
So 4 years ago today, Luke turned pro, right? So I actually posted that on my stories.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it came up on my Facebook and yeah. So Luke turned pro. So that was like mission accomplished, right? And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm in my heavy off season now. Had my wrist surgery. I'm 3 months in a cast. So I'm pretty much, I take 6 weeks off and then I spend a couple of weeks just doing legs. And then I start getting back into an off season. I go, okay, I'm gonna do a qualifier, redo. Luke got an invite for the Arnold. So that was 2017 and we went to work. And that was the year that him and I made the most amount of progress, as what I was saying to you earlier.
Yeah.
We just, every week, every session was just PRs all over the place, big lifts. Like we were deadlifting, squatting, benching, maxing out machines. His videos were going viral, mine were catching traction. We were bench pressing the 200-pound dumbbells for reps. Like, it was just getting fun, but it was, some of it was getting risky as well, right? But this is when, you know, some of the numbers we were putting up. I mean, I was doing a 7-plate squat at the end of a leg session.
Yeah. He
He was doing a 8.5-plate deadlift for reps at the end of a back session. We're doing 4 or 5-plate bent over rows, 10-plate T-bar rows. I mean, it was serious. We were on him. He just turned pro, so we both lit a fire under us, and you know. So then I did my qualifier. So sorry, Luke did his first Arnold in the March, and that's where he was next to Dallas.
Okay.
Cedric, so like his first ever debut, he walks out, and in the lineups, so just when they present, Luke was number 3, Dallas was number 2, so he's like pro debut right next to Dallas McCarver. I'm like, oh geez, that's not who you want to be stood next to in your pro debut. Actually, I think Fuad did the Arnold as well. Yeah, and so then Luke did a couple of shows. He did the Australia right after that. Then he did, I want to say he did Toronto. And then I was prepping for the Kent qualifier. So Kent is a regional show in, again for the supers. I qualified for the British finals. And then Luke had shut it down at that point. So he helped me finish off my prep into the British finals in 2017, and that's the year James Hollingshead won. Okay. So I was on stage. I was actually, once we did the first call outs, second call outs, and I was in the second call outs, I knew I was done and dusted. Actually, 5 of the top 6 are now pros from that year. That was the last year they had a British finals, where in Britain, only 1 pro card a year goes out to the overall winner. So it's not weight classed, it's you win your weight class, then you go to the overall. If you win the overall, it's 1 pro card, right? Now it's all a little different. The NPC have come in, there's multiple cards. But so James got the last true pro card in England, right? And I remember going backstage after prejudging, and I just said to James, right, well, I'm done and dusted, what do you need? Like, what do you need me to do to help you backstage? Well, let's pump you up, let's get you ready, So we got I've actually got some footage of James and I in pictures where I'm helping him pump up before he went back out for the overall, because I was I was out of the overall, so then I started helping him. So that was 2017. I then went straight onto a rebound working with Milos, and that's where I got up to 285. And again, I posted a picture this morning as the heaviest / best I've looked, because I got to 292 this year and it was not the same look. So that year I was like 285, and then we started getting ready for a show early in 2018, and I got sepsis, so that's blood poisoning. 3 weeks out, actually I got it 4 weeks out, and I ignored it for a week and a half and ended up in ICU again. So I had to have emergency surgery, the knee put me on dialysis. So according to the specialist, if I'd have waited another couple of hours, I would have been on dialysis. And that left me with stage 3 kidney disease, so it scarred my kidneys. And that's where I semi-retired from competing, because I figured kidneys, there's no going back from that, and I don't want to mess around with my health long term. So I basically shut it down, and still body built, but the focus was all on Luke then. It was all like, hey, you're a pro card, let's get you to Olympia was the goal. So for a year and a half, we went to work, and I just stayed in shape, didn't push my food, didn't go crazy with anything or put my health on the line, just kept myself around 260 and in okay shape. And then obviously Luke goes on to do the Arnold in 2019.
Yes.
Comes third, so that's where a lot of people will remember he placed third against Brandon and William.
Yes.
So that was like Luke's big coming out party.
That was the putting on the map, as they would say.
And in the same day is where I met Denise, my wife. So my wife works for Protam. So in the week leading up to the Arnold, Luke was sponsored by Protam, so he's getting his tan on, and Denise is one of the girls there. And we get to the night show and she comes and sits next to me, and we just hit it off. And then post-show, Luke comes off stage, he got third, so that's a win for us, right?
Sure.
We're celebrating. Denise and some of the other girls come out to the bar with us. We walk into the bar at the Hilton, and I'm a big UFC guy, right? Big UFC fan. Well, that night, John Jones was fighting and Kamaru Usman were fighting. And I'm like, oh, I can't really ditch Luke, or I can't really, like it's Luke's night, so I can't really say, hey, I want to go find a sports bar and watch the UFC. So I'm like, well, we'll just go to the lobby. But it was like 11 o'clock at this point, it's late. So I go sit down, Denise is there, Luke gets a beer, I get a whiskey. I look to my left, and Randy Couture sat there. And I'm like, well, Randy Couture's a legend. And he's got his phone up, watching the UFC, right? Denise freaks out because she knows who Randy is. And I'm like, oh, okay, she's brownie points now. Because Luke's like, who? And I'm like, this is how it actually happened. I went, holy shit, it's Randy Couture. Luke goes, who? I'm like, UFC Hall of Famer, ex-heavyweight champion of the world, like, the natural. He's like, who? He's in the Expendables. Luke goes, oh, I know who you mean. I'm like, God damn. I'm like, that's how I sound about Arnold when I was a kid, right? I'm like, oh, Arnold, you mean the guy from Terminator? And then there's old bodybuilders are like, no, I mean, Mr. like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? So I'm like leaning over, like watching on his phone, and he glances over and he's like, oh, hey brother, you wanna come watch? And I'm like, So I'm like, then I'm there, leaning over Randy Couture's shoulder, watching UFC with him. Luke's just come off the stage, got third. Sean Murden come up to me, hey buddy, how you doing? Slaps me on the back. I'm like, oh hey, with Randy here. And I'm like, this is just wild, right?
Do you feel that at that time, that's when Ben Chow was noticed, or do you feel?
At this point, it was, there wasn't one without the other, right? So at this point, Luke's starting to get noticed. Luke's on everybody's radar. He's on the judge's radar. He's on Jim Mannion's radar. They all come up to him, and I'm just always there. So they always know it's Ben and Luke, right? It was just, wherever Luke went, I went. Wherever I went, Luke went. And it just became, it almost became like the Dorian and Leroy thing, right? It was just like Dorian and his training partner, they're inseparable. They didn't. So yeah, I started getting, people knew who I was. Sean Roden, he was the reigning Mr. Olympia at the time. He's like, hey man, how you doing? Like Cedric kind of came over to me after the show and we were just chatting. I was chatting to, I'm like looking around, I'm like having friendly conversation, not just like fan conversations. Right. I'm shooting the shit with some of the top bodybuilders in the world. Victor Martinez, I remember walking backstage with him, and he just got off stage after prejudging, and him and I just walking, and we're just chatting about Dominican Republic and food and random shit. So it's all a bit surreal. It's all a whirlwind, and then obviously I meet Denise, and I'm like, wow, that's, you know, it's kind of, you meet somebody that you know that you're gonna spend the rest of your life with, but then I'm like, she's in America and I'm flying back to the UK, so it was this whole big thing. Anyway, so we then go back home, actually we did, that year we did 23 flights in 1 year with Luke competing, so we went from UK to America, back to the UK to Australia, back to the UK, back to Indy to do the Indy show. Yeah, then he took some time off, then he got ready for Tampa, we went to Tampa, then back to London, then London back to Vegas for the Olympia, right? So that was that year, that was last year. And at the point where we were flying back from Tampa was when Luke and I had the conversation, and he told me I should move out here. And I was really torn because I didn't want to leave what we had going on, but I wanted to be with Denise and trying to do a long distance relationship. So I kept this kind of crossroads, and Luke and I had the conversation. We were like, look, the goal was to get to the Olympia. He said, we got to the Olympia, he said, you know, we'll still always have that relationship, but you know, it might be time to start your own thing.
He wanted what was best for you.
Yeah, he'd seen me go through a couple of bad relationships, and I mean, Luke and I for 3.5, 4 years basically lived together, and did everything together, business, training, hanging out. It was just constant. I'd go to his house first thing in the morning, and I would leave there last thing at night just to go home to sleep and then back again. So we do the Olympia, and then I basically bought all my bags with me, and then flew from Vegas to Texas with Denise because she was working the Olympia, and so we flew down here, and I've never looked back. Yeah. So in a way, it's given everything that happened this year with Luke, when he passed away, I'm glad that I wasn't in the UK. It would have been, I've been almost able to hide from it here. Although I've dealt with it, I haven't had it in my face, not a constant reminder. I don't go into the same gym every day that we used to go to. There's not those constant reminders. And I've got my life here that I've had to focus on. Obviously Denise fell pregnant, which is what we were trying to, so it wasn't an accident. So it was something, again, I didn't really anticipate for myself for years. Until I met her, I didn't want children. And then meeting her changed my perspective on everything. So actually at that time, I was injured again. So another injury. So let me take it back. Olympia, I moved here. In December, I flew home for Christmas to see the family. Luke picks me up from the airport, and he's like, hey, we're filming We were filming back.
I remember this. 'Cause
Yeah, I have told this story before, but I'll tell it again.
I remember the video.
Yeah.
The day you were there. You're like, I'm just a powerlifter. I got to keep up with these guys. I remember the video because you guys started with pullovers.
Yes.
And you're like,
with James as well. James
is there. I remember that video, and then
they're like, oh, but he's a cowboy now, and Luke's ripping me apart, and so at this point I decided to give powerlifting a go because I'm decently strong. Bodybuilding, I was like, I want to eat, and and I was focusing on kind of Denise and I were starting a family, so I'm like, I can get ready for a powerlifting show and try to have a kid much easier than I can get ready for a bodybuilding show and attempt to conceive, right? So anyway, I'm back in the UK. First session, Luke picks me up from the airport, gives me a meal. I've just got off a 14-hour flight, right? I'm twisted and busted. We walk in, there's a camera on us rolling. We train back. Okay, fine. The gym's got brand new dumbbells. We're in Muscleworks, which is a really good gym in London. We've got 250-pound dumbbells. Luke's like, yeah, let's take these for a ride. So we do dumbbell rows. We're just single arm rows. I can feel my body's a little out of whack. I'm a little twisted or whatever. So anyway, I do them, but I leave an extra rep. I leave a few behind. I'm like, I'm not pushing it. I've just got off a flight. These boys are fresh, full deep off season. I've been firing all cylinders for a couple of months now, right? It's December, Luke's prime. He's recovered from the Olympia. So we finish the whole back session. We do all of that. We do the dumbbell rows, heavy machine rows, and then we go in RDL at the end. And I said, well, I'm powerlifter now, so I'll deadlift. Plus, I can deadlift a bit more than like an RDL, right? So I'll be able to hang. So we get up four plates, 5 plates, 6 plates, 6.5 plates. And I'm like, I said, I'm gonna stay at 6.5 and I'll stay right here. I'll do my set at this. Okay, cool. So I go down, strap up, pick the weight up. As I get to the top, I feel my glutes tingle. Like pins and needles in both glutes. I'm like, put the weight down, like, oh, that didn't feel good. But then as soon as I put it down, I felt fine. Luke goes in, does his set, James does his set. I'm like, I'm gonna go again. Like, it was just, maybe something was just off. So yeah, I do a rep, I'm like, I feel it again. So I do another rep, I'm like, the meathead in me does a third. And I'm like, put it down, I'm like, nah, something doesn't feel right. I'm done. That was the last set anyway, I'm not gonna go to failure. So we go back to Luke's, and then I'm sitting there on his couch, because I was staying at Luke's for the first 2 weeks, and I just get this like sciatic pain straight through my right leg, and I'm like, ah. And then I'm like, well, maybe it's to the flight, maybe it's the bed, because I was sleeping on, he had a mattress on the floor in his spare bedroom because he hadn't got a bed yet, he just moved into a new house. So I'm like, maybe it's the bed, I'm just, so a couple of weeks go by, I'm still trying to train. Weirdly enough, I can still squat with no pain, but I've got this sciatic pain constantly now, like getting worse. Denise flies over from Texas to meet my parents. We have Christmas together. We fly back here on the 31st of December. On the 1st of January, I come in here, load up the safety squat bar, put 6 plates on, walk it out. And I did 6 plates the week before for 5. So I'm like, I should get this. So I do 1 rep, do 2 reps, do 3 reps, do 4, and I'm like, that feels way heavier than the 3rd rep. Like, it was almost like someone put 90 pounds aside on, and I'm just like, what the hell just happened? I just lost everything. So I barely get it up and walk it back in. And I'm like, I think I might be done for today. Like, didn't feel good. Okay, so I head back inside the house and kind of rest up, and then I just feel everything tighten up and lock up on me. So then I spent the next 4 days where I can't move. I can't stand up. I'm like literally end up sleeping on the floor because the mattress was just wrecking my back. So Denise and I end up setting up a little makeshift bed at the bottom of the bed on the concrete floor. And then I go get some scans done. Because I'm like, something's really bad now. Like it's been a month, it's been 5 weeks now since the Luke training back with Luke and James. So I go down to book in an MRI. And then the next day, because over here, it's obviously private, so I'm like, sweet, I can get everything done instantly. MRI comes back and I've completely ruptured my L4, L5, the disc, and the SI as well. So they were ruptured at the back, posteriorly, and then I also was pinching the root nerve as well down the canal, and the facet joints had bad arthritis on them. So the spinal specialist was like, you've got like a trifecta going on here. It's like a three-way deal going down. Yeah, the specialist was like, you're in a bad way. So we basically did traction every day. So I was having to go into the clinic and they put me on this spinal board. They strapped my pelvis and then put a strap around my waist, and then this machine gradually pulls the discs apart and allows the rupture, it encourages the ruptured disc to go back in, because basically the nuclei of the vertebral disc had come out the back, right? So they're trying to create space for the nerve and everything to fall back into. So once that happened, the problem is there's still the rupture on the disc, right? So it's still like the scar, or a weak point. So my option, well, the first option was to have PRP surgery or injections. So they did 9 injections through my back and into my hip. And that was the 24th of February they did that. And it got a little better for the first month, and then it stopped improving. And then nothing got changed really. So we're now into March. And then this guy contacts me on Instagram, a guy called, his handle's like Jack Neuro. It turns out he's a neurologist in Australia who happens to be a bodybuilder. And he reached out to me. He'd worked with Justin Artowitz. He'd worked with a bunch of other pro Australian bodybuilders. And he said to me, describe your pain to me. He said, like I see you had this injury. So I explained what I felt. And then he wrote back to me and explained my MRI scan without actually seeing the scan. So he said, it sounds like you've done this, 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 and this. And he had described what the scan had showed. So I'm like, okay, this guy now, he knows what he's talking about. So I'm like, okay, I'll give this guy a shot. So he's like, you need to be deadlifting. You need to be, first off, you need to rack pull. He said, your squats are good. You need to be squatting and deadlifting to rehab your back. And I'm like, well, this is different, because at the minute I'm not training. And this guy's encouraging me to train. Well, the meathead in me is like, okay, good. So he's like super strict, like you're training an 80-year-old to deadlift or rack pull for the first time, and then, right, it's like, so you go from like mid-thigh height with just the bar, and you're just squeezing, contracting, pulling a vacuum, everything is super tight, everything is textbook form. Do that for 1 week, like every other day. Then add a little weight. Then once you can do that, drop it down to the knee and just progress, but do it everything for a week, then make the progression. Do everything for a week. Within 4 weeks, I'm pulling off the floor 5 plates. No real back pain. I mean, I say no back pain, 90% better. I'm squatting 6 plates again for reps. I'm like, okay. Denise is now, we found out she fell pregnant around mid-February, so we're towards the end of, I think we're in like the middle of April at this point, and we're on the way to town. I'm like, hey, so the baby's due October 30th. And there's a show around the end of September, early October. What do you think if I prep for a show? Like, how are you? Bear in mind, she's never seen me prep for a show, and
Gotcha.
I can be a bit of a pussy. It hurts. It sucks, right? Getting ready for a show, the last 4 or 5 weeks, they hurt. So I need to put it out. I need her to sign off on it.
Right.
And she's like, if that's what you want to do, like, she's super supportive of everything. So she's like, if that's what you want to do, yeah, we can do that. That's fine, do it. I'm like, you sure? She's like, 100%. I'm like, okay, once I decide to go, I'm going. So I'm a very all or nothing kind of guy. So I'm like, okay, we're doing the show. So I think I was like 24 weeks out at this point. So now I start eating. Now I start eating like a pig. Because I'm like, I'll do 8 weeks to build calories up, because I'd not really been doing anything. I wasn't training, I wasn't doing it. So I'm like, okay, my back seems to be holding up. I can start training properly again. So I can start eating. So I off-season, but I did an old school bulk, right? I just pancakes in the morning, egg whites and pancakes, turkey bacon, some maple syrup. Like, I was doing the macro. I hit my macros, right?
Yeah,
but they
yeah,
were sloppy, and I got up to 292, and like I said, it was not a pretty 292. So then about 18 weeks out, I figured I'd start dieting down at 16 weeks out. 18 weeks out is when Luke passed. And that rocked me obviously for a week or so, and I turned to Denise and I said, I haven't really eaten in a week. I'm 17 weeks out, I'm supposed to start dieting at 16. I'm just gonna start the diet. I'm just gonna jump into the prep now. Like, let's put the foot down.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. And everyone was going pretty smooth. Got to about 10 weeks out and body started to be a bit stubborn. And then got to 5 weeks out and I noticed that my body's really not as lean as I should be, and I'm holding a lot of water in my legs and some things that are warning signs, some red flags that I'm aware of from having my kidney issues back in 2018. So I shut the weekend down. It was the weekend, so I shut everything down. Didn't train, didn't do cardio. I didn't come off diet as such. I was having a high day anyway, so I just relaxed off on my eating just to see whether my body was stressed. And then I booked in blood work for the Monday. So when I got that done, Tuesday morning they sent me my results and it confirmed that I had, so I'd been doing blood work for the past 3 years and my blood work looked and appeared fine, which is one of the reasons I was okay to push a prep. What I hadn't done was a urine sample during that time. And what the urine sample showed this time was there was a massive amount of protein in my urine that my kidneys were not filtering. So the kidney issues that I had previously from the sepsis, my EGFR, my CK, all those numbers were okay. So if you only looked at my blood work, you'd think everything was normal. You looked at the urine and the blood albumin level, it indicates that I have a condition called nephrotic syndrome. And so it is something I'm gonna have to live with and manage for the rest of my life, because like I said, the kidneys, they're not gonna, they don't heal, they don't improve. You just have to limit it. So this is at 5 weeks out, so I had to have a discussion between Denise and Fuad about what we thought the best approach was, or the next step was. Do I carry on prepping? Do I shut it down? Am I gonna risk my health too much? So we decided to basically finish the prep as healthy as I could, which in terms of, as a competitive bodybuilder, when you're pushing your body to the limits, sometimes you're not in the healthiest position to get as lean as you want to be. So I had to take the healthy option, which meant that I couldn't push my body as hard as I needed to. And so the final look I knew wasn't gonna be what I'd set out to achieve. But it's something that I was fully determined to see through to the end. I'd set out to, once I started the prep, set out to make a point and do it kind of as a tribute to Luke, right? So I'm like, the hell, I'm giving up on this. Yeah, so that was, we had to manage some things, had to be a bit more calculated and sensible about stuff, and saw the prep through to the end. And actually, the last 2 or 3 weeks, I pulled things together better than I was hoping for. And actually the final look, again, I wasn't in the condition that I should have been or wanted to be in, but I managed to put together a package which I was okay with.
Do you think all the adversity that you have faced, really your whole life, the only way you could really get through it all was because how hard your dad pushed you?
So, I mean,
because
there's a mentality that my dad's installed in me that there's no escaping.
There's a lot of points that people would quit.
Yeah.
That you've gone through.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, a motorcycle accident, number one. That would be crippling for a normal person.
Yeah, I've had 4 knee surgeries, so most people that have had 1 knee surgery can't bodybuild competitively. I'm lucky in that respect. That's not by design. I'm very lucky that my knees have had things removed from them, and I can still squat and do what I need to do. Yeah, my mentality of that is just, like I said, I'm all or nothing. My dad's very much the same. If I start something, I'm finishing it. Or I just won't bother starting it, right? I don't see the point. If I can't do something 100%, it doesn't interest me. So it was difficult for me to deal with at 5 weeks out, knowing that I couldn't go 100%. But I had to, the motorbike accident had taught me to work around obstacles.
Right.
Okay, you can't change A, B, C over here, but X, Y, Z over here you can change. So don't worry about A, B, and C, worry about X, Y, and Z, right? So that's my mentality now. If I can't change it, I don't stress about it. What do I have control over? That's what I focus on. So I just take control of things, the variables that I have control of, and let everything else fall into place. And also having Denise, I think, is a complete game changer. For the first time, I've had somebody who's fully supportive, emotionally and everything else. You know, just I would probably not have been able to see that prep through on my own. So there's a big part of that is owed to her, for sure. But yeah, a lot of those obstacles in the last 5 years have definitely built my character, changed my perspective on life, made me realize what is important, what's not important, and like I said, not stressing about things that aren't in my control. My genetics, they're not in my control. But how hard I train, the food I eat, the work I put in, that's in my control. So yeah, okay, I don't have Phil Heath's genetics. Can't change that. So what can I change? I can change everything else. Everything else I do in my day, I'm in control of. And that's how, whenever I get messages from people about injuries or they can't do X, they can't do this, I can't do that, oh, this sucks, I'm never gonna be able to, I've got this injury, my lower back's screwed, I can't squat. Like, okay, it's fine, what can you do? You can't squat, fine, that's okay, you don't need to. Can you leg press, can you hack squat, can you work around it, can you do leg extensions, can you do lunges, there's something, we'll find you something. And we can work as hard as we can on that thing that you can do. Rather than waking up going, what's the point, I can't do that, so I'm not gonna bother. And it's I try to be as open and honest, and I've been through, I think, a lot, and I think sharing that and being open about it allows people to relate, because I think there's a lot of people out there that think everything, especially with bodybuilders, has to be perfect. Like, oh, it comes so easy to him. Oh, he looks like that, and oh, it would be nice to have that kind of be as easy for that. And it's not easy for everyone. Just a lot of people don't talk about their hardships. Some people don't have that many, but so.
Maybe we all have a story.
Yeah, and that's mine.
This is the Ben Chow story.
Yeah, that is my story.